Hello everyone, this is the Good Captain and welcome to another tutorial video on the Midway Guadalcanal game system from Avalon Hill, Smithsonian Edition, and this is part 2 of the Battle of Coral Sea. I'm going to do a quick review of what happened last turn, but before we do, I have to pick up where we sort of left off here. I forgot to return the combat air patrols, both for the Allied and the Japanese side, and this is something that's done during the air return phase. If you'll recall, we put a combat air patrol over the Yorktown, so we'll just return that to the Yorktown by dropping it into the arming box. Again, this is something you do normally during the air return phase. And also over the strike force, we'll return Shikaku's fighters to Shikaku, and the Rabaul combat air patrol drops down onto the airfield and is placed in the arming box of Rabaul. So that's it. Now we already rolled for sides, and the Japanese rolled for side A. So we'll go ahead and start with the Japanese. But quick recap: the Japanese sort of are jockeying into position here for a massive airstrike, massive late afternoon airstrike on May 4th against Port Moresby. Okay, and that's going to kick off probably in this video. Yeah. And then on the USN side, the Allied side here, we conducted what ended up being a surprisingly effective raid against Tulagi and the two destroyers that started out in that hex, sinking that destroyer unit, which was worth 7 points, and wrecking the base. There's no chance for that base to be reconstituted. You can repair damage to damaged units, but once the counter has been obliterated, it's considered wrecked to the point where it can't be effective for the duration of the scenario. So Tulagi is out as a seaplane base. It cannot be used against us in the future. Okay, so the first thing we do after we roll for sides is the assembly step here in the action phase. So we'll start with the Japanese since they're side A. And this is where we're going to launch our raid. Now, the strike force is 6 hexes away, which is technically out of range at the moment for some of the aircraft. The torpedo aircraft on the Zuikaku and the Shokaku only have a range of 5. But naval movement occurs prior to the actual launch of aircraft. So, in the assembly step, we're merely declaring what we intend to launch. And since I know I'm going to be moving the strike force closer to Port Moresby, we will have the range. So I'm going to launch that raid. So the Shikaku will start first. We are going to launch every warplane. We're going to leave the scout behind here. We'll drop it down here. Okay. Now, I should point out that the launch capacity of the Shikaku is 3. That means we can pick 3 of the stack. 3 full air units can be launched into a normal strike. We'll take the units that have the shortest range, which are the torpedo bomber groups, and we'll take this fighter group, and that's it. The remaining dive bomber groups will have to go into the max strike box, which reduces their range by 1. So these dive bomber groups are now a range of 5. So technically this whole strike group, except for the 0 fighter escorts, have a range of 5. And we're going to do basically the same thing with the Zuikaku. We're going to launch everything. Actually, I'm going to leave 1 fighter group behind. We might need them next turn as a combat air patrol if we don't demolish the base this turn. So yeah, we're going to basically copy-paste the exact same procedure. We're going to have the dive bombers be in the max strike box, and the torpedo and fighter groups will be in the normal strike box. Okay, that's it. That's good enough. Okay. But we're not only going to use the carrier aircraft. We're going to throw in everything from Rabaul, and by everything I mean every single piece. Let's see if this works right. So we're going to, out of the ready box, we're going to move to the normal strike. 1, 2, And we have a 10 launch capacity at Rabaul. It's a massive base. This is actually a half unit. Yeah. Flip it over, and if it says Elim on the back, it's only a half unit. So that's 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5. This will stay. I have a plan for you. These are the float fighters. 7.5. A scout counts as a half, so that's 8. And then both of these scouts will be 9 whole air units. We still have 1 left in the ready box here. We're going to move him to the high cap. He's going to fly Combat Air Patrol. And this is just a little group of float zeros that we're going to... We can see the Allied operations card, and we know that the Allied aircraft carriers are too far away to launch a raid. We also know that there's no units that are able to attack Moresby. So we're only putting this over Rabaul base to swat down any scouts that might venture into this hex, okay? Try to swat them down. Okay, so that's it for the assembly step for the Japanese. We'll go over to the Allies. And now it's pretty clear that what's going on here. We can see a massive buildup of Japanese air units. Pretty clear that it's going to be a strike against Rabaul. Or against Moresby, excuse me. So we'll put up both of our fighter groups into the high cap box there to try to do some damage to the Japanese. And then also we'll move this scout into the normal strike box. Okay, all right. So that's it for the, oh no, and then over here, the Yorktown will launch its the only ready unit it has is a group of fighters, which of course go into the Combat Air Patrol. Lexington will do the same thing this turn. Both are going to be moving closer and could be seen by Japanese flying boats, so that gives us an opportunity to try to shoot some of them down. But everything else, that's it. It's going to be a pretty quiet turn for the Allies in terms of air operations. So the assembly step is complete for both sides. We now move to the ready step. And this is where we shift. This is very quick. We move anything that's in the arming box now moves to the ready box, or vice versa. There's an argument for putting units in the ready box into the arming box, but we won't go over that, why that is right now. Okay. So starting with the Japanese, we're going to move this fighter group on the Shokaku into the ready box here. And then at Rabaul, we'll move these units into the ready box here. So they'll be available next turn for next turn's air operations. Okay, and for the Allies side, whoops. That just means moving this group into the ready box, this group into the ready box. Oops. Like so. And everything that's on Port Moresby will be in the ready box as well now. Okay, great. So pretty easy. Back to the sequence of play. Now we do sea movement, starting with the Japanese. This is when we take a quick look at the turn here. On turn 3, we see this circle and this triangle. Again, this means that any ships with movement factors of 2, and also in this case, any ships with movement factor of 3, both if every ship in a task group has a ship movement of 2 or 3 on this turn, then we can move 2 spaces. So let's go to the Japanese board and pull up their operations card. Quick perusal of the units. Again, the bottom right of each ship unit is the movement factor. So 3, 3, 3, 3. All of the units in the strike force have a movement of 3. All the units in the support force have a movement of 3. Only the attack force, which has these transport units, they only have a movement of 1. Both strike force and support force can move up to 2 spaces. So the strike force is going to move 1 into C2 and 2 into B1. And that we're at 5 hex range, which is perfect for what we want to do. The support force will just move 1 space into Rabaul. And that's it for the Japanese. For the Americans, uh, this is a. I was studying the battlefield for a while and wondering what to do after this surprisingly successful raid against Tulagi. I was thinking we might lay up a shot on Shortland, uh, a, a early afternoon raid on Shortland. So to do so, we're actually going to move Lexington's Task Force 11 1, 2, and Yorktown's group could move up to 2 as well, but we want to stay out of the way of the land-based air, and we will only move to K9 in this case. We're just going to move one space. But next turn we're going to utilize some of the cool game rules and do an unequal movement legs attack and have Lexington's bombing force basically join with Yorktown strike force, and then everyone will land on Yorktown. So it'll be kind of a unequal legged attack. But anyway, I'll explain that more when we get there. At least gives us the option to do something on our way over to Port Moresby if it's still there when we get there. So now we'll go ahead and move on to the air movement and search step. So we put all the flying units on the flying air units are moved onto the search board, and then we'll do all the searches. And we'll start, of course, with the Japanese. So let me get their search board up. And so I'm going to put this strike group here. Just use this open plot of ocean. So the northern one will be the normal strike box units, and then the bottom one will be the max strike box, just to sort of keep them separated so we know what they are. Not that it really matters, but at any rate. And the same is true for Rabaul. We'll put this big stack of units right there. Wonk. And that's it. And then we will just conduct the Japanese air movement and search step. So we're going to start with our scouts. So first off, this information doesn't carry over from turn to turn, so we're just going to drop this. We have to reacquire that. We know that the Yorktown was here. It could be up to 2 spaces in any direction away from that group. That's a pretty large, expansive ocean to search, but we've got one plane out there on patrol already, and we've got a couple more coming out to join it. So after studying the position of the scout out here in N8 relative to the scouts we have coming out to reinforce it, I think the most efficient use of the one that's out here on patrol is to use it to try to find or pinpoint where the Lexington group is and what it's composed of. And to that end, it's a little weird to do this solitaire, but given again that the onus is on Port Moresby, I figure it's best to search the westernmost hexes, since the Lexington group can't have moved more than 3 spaces. We definitely want to sort of check out M10, M11, the N row, the O row, okay? So I think the best way to do this is just to go straight into N9. That's the first hex the Lexington could be in. So we'll go 1. Are you there? No. 2. Are you there? No. Or actually 2, right. Okay, something's there. But we're not 100% certain what that is. It could be the Yorktown group, which was in L8. Maybe they joined up here. It could be the surface group, right? So gaining accurate information of what's there is pretty paramount if we're the Japanese player. So after a short deliberation, I've decided that this Japanese flying boat will spend 7 movement points to thoroughly scan this hex. So 7 points times 2 points per extra point spent would be 14, plus it's a daytime turn, so we have a positive 17. The Japanese will roll. Oh, I'm sorry. First, I almost got ahead of myself. Remember that the Lexington has a combat air patrol over it. So the first thing we do is roll a d10 as the allies. So the allies will roll, they roll a 6, and then the Japanese will roll, and they roll a 2. This, in point of fact, is 3 times as much. Wow. So the combat air patrol of the Lexington drops one of the precious Japanese flying boats, and this will go to the deep 6 pile. Okay. Now, so hang on. One other thing we failed to do here. Don't forget to mark your hexes. So we'll pull one of the USN markers, and that was hex M10. And now, even though this Japanese flying boat was shot down, it does still get to roll to get out a radio message of what it saw. So we just don't have the additional movement factors expended. We have no bonus from that. It's a completely open ocean hex, hex M10, so there's no bonus because of the presence of land. And the only bonus we have is +3 for a day turn. So the Japanese will now roll a dice. It's an 8, +3 for daytime. So we have an 11. The Americans roll a 5. So this is the Japanese have rolled twice as much as the Allied side. This does qualify for exact information. And that's clearly defined here in Rule 15A4. So the exact side of an enemy task force marker is displayed only when the information is reliable. And then parentheses, it says 2 times and 3 times. Otherwise, the question mark side is displayed. Now, the Allied player actually does not have to report if there's a carrier present. All the rules state to do in this situation is to tell the Japanese player the actual number of ships and task force markers in the hex. So the Allied player would simply say there is a single task force in the hex, and it is composed of, and this is where it gets a little weird, each, just be advised that the destroyer squadrons, even though they're one ship unit, you can count the individual ships in that squadron as individual ships. So we would report to the Japanese that there are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ships. 8 ships. Which is the exact same number of ships that Task Force 17 with the Yorktown was. So the Japanese player doesn't really get any information. This could be the Yorktown group. What the Japanese player knows, though, is it's not both, or it's not a combination of groups. He could even infer that it's not Task Force 16 because this is 9 ships. So what he does know is it's one of the other carrier task forces, and it is now eligible for a potential submarine strike later. Okay, so now we will continue with the Japanese spotters, and hopefully we have a little bit better luck. I'm going to pull out the Japanese scouts. Alright, we'll set up the scouts here, even though we know they're coming out of Rabaul. We'll start with our shorter ranged scouts first, and the main goal of this trio of scouts is going to be to try to ascertain what happened to the carrier group in K8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll say 7 and call that out J6. Nothing's there. And the last movement, point 8, K7. And there's nothing there either. Okay. Watch the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And just count out this, we'll call out this last one. Is there anything in I8? And of course, no. And finally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We call it J7. There's nothing there. Now we can search out 3 more hexes, but I really want to search out J8 and K8 because if there's a carrier group there, it will be in range of at least some of our land attack units out of our ball, the ones that have the 9 hex range. Okay, and there's a number that do of powerful units as a matter of fact. So we have 8, so we'll go 9, and there's nothing there. 10, and there's nothing there, I think, right? Yeah, and then we can search out one more hex, and I was anticipating going here. Let's see. So, well, let's see. If we were the Japanese player, I might honestly anticipate the American player to use both his movement points from L8, and maybe he's in J9 since he's not in any of these. He's not in K7, J7, K8, J8. So if he moved 2 spaces, yeah, I would probably say J9 over K9 because why wouldn't you take advantage of that 2 movement points just to get to Moresby faster? And so yeah, in this case, I would say the Japanese miss spotting the Americans at all since we only moved to K9. Now, that's it for patrolling for the Japanese. Now we're going to launch our air strikes, but we want to do this carefully. The dive bomber units out of the strike force all only have 5 movements. Everything else has its printed value. They all group up over the strike force and then move 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's a reason I'm stopping there before moving into the base. That's because we're going to have them meet up with all of the units coming out of Rabaul. So it'll look like this. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now because we all moved into this hex prior to going into Port Moresby, we will not have to risk a wave attack. This is a wave attack occurs whenever 2 groups are coming at a target and don't enter the same hex before they attack the target. In other words, this is us kind of circling up and grouping up and then heading in. So we're able to now hit Port Moresby with a combined effort. Okay? But before we resolve that combat, we have the Americans conduct their air movement and search steps. So we will put, for what it's worth, we're going to put the scout from Port Moresby on the board. And I think that's it. Yeah, there's nothing else in any normal strike box. So we're just going to be doing a little bit of scouting. Okay. To me, the most obvious one to start with is this patrol plane in E3. Now we have to land 5 hexes away from the base that we came from. So the air return phase, we need to be 5 hexes away. So we need to be in the hex we're in, or 5 hexes away from Port Moresby in general. So the most efficient search pattern, I think, is this. F2, F1, G2, G3, and then F3. And then this plane is done searching. You cannot search on the air return phase. So we're just going to go 1, nothing's there. 2, something's there. The Japanese player doesn't have to say anything just yet. Other than before you search, there is a combat air patrol. So the Japanese now will attempt to swat down our little scout. They roll a 4, and the Americans roll a 3. So no, it doesn't happen. Let's see, we moved from E3, we moved 1, 2. We need 2 points to move back to E3 or F3. So we can only expend 1 movement point to gain better information, but we'll go ahead and do that. And then it's daylight, so we have a net positive of +5. Again, that's +3 for the day turn, and +2 because we're spending a movement factor in the hex, an additional movement factor. So we have a net +5, and we'll still have 2 spaces to move to be within range so that we don't crash into the sea and run out of gas. So we'll roll a d10. We have a 6. We had 5, it's 11. The Japanese, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot a crucial modifier here. In this case, it's not only a +5. Because we're searching a base hex, it's actually a +6. I don't know. Actually, the rules are not clear if it's inclusive. I think it's either or though, because there's a slash. So I'm assuming this means you get either one. You get one or the other, not both. So we're going to take +6 for there being a base, 3 for being a day. That's 9 plus 2 for the movement, so that we're up to a +11. So the dice that we rolled was a 6, and that brings us up to 17. The Japanese roll. They roll a 4, and now we have exact information on what is in Rabaul Harbor. So we're going to place 2 exact markers because now we know that the support force is in there and the attack force is in there. And we have all the information we need from them. So that was a great little patrol. With our 2 remaining points, we're going to drop down to F2 and then F3 and search F3. And there's nothing there. Okay. And then finally, this PBY out over here, or not finally, but next, there's a PBY out here in I4. And the job of this patrol plane right now is to ensure that there's no carriers lurking on the north end of the board here, coming from the north to attack our carriers. So the furthest out they could be is the K line. We're going to search J3, 1, K3, 2, K2 at 3, K1 at 4, J1 at 5, J2 at 6, I3 at 7, I2 at 8, and and I1 at 9. So that we've searched that whole block of ocean and we see nothing, coupled with this patrol plane's inability to find anything here, or find the main carrier group here. Strike group could be in the G column or the H column here. Otherwise, they're up in the Bismarck Sea. So we're going to go ahead and launch our patrol plane up towards the Bismarck Sea. 1, 2, let's see if 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So they're probably in, now we can kind of deduce that if they were up in the Bismarck Sea, which hex they would be in. So yeah, we'll go B5, B4, B3, B2, and just, this is the first hex where we'd search it. There's nothing here. We've used 4 out of 5 movements. So we'll just for fun, I don't know, how about, I'm not sure which hex I would choose as the American commander. It seems more likely that the Japanese would go into B1 because it's an open ocean hex. Or it could be, if they're not in B2, why would they stay in C2? Yeah, sorry, that's deductive reasoning enough for me. I'm just going to say we're moved to B1. And yes, okay, so we find something there. And the Japanese will roll their cap. The Japanese roll a 4 and the Americans roll a 10, so we skirt past the combat air patrol. We get no modifier other than daylight, so the Americans roll, or the allied player rolls a die and adds 3, and it's 12. And the Japanese will roll a die and they have a 9, so it remains a question. The Japanese can lie to us and give us a mixed up information about how many ships are actually present. It doesn't change the status of this marker. It remains a question, and that means it won't be eligible for a submarine attack. So, okay, fine. I can see we're just at the 30-minute mark here, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this video for now. Again, got a little long, but the action phase for both players is complete. We'll now do the combat phase in the next video and conduct the Japanese raid on Port Moresby. Thank you for watching this. All the best from the good captain, and bye-bye.